I pulled off the main road onto a long, winding dirt path, my car bouncing over uneven patches of gravel. The GPS had cut out miles ago, leaving me to rely on written directions from the Airbnb host. They were simple enough. Follow the dirt road for exactly 3 miles, past the rusted mailbox on the right, then take the next left onto a narrow trail leading to the cabin. It was already getting dark, the last light of the sun fading behind the dense treeline. The thick canopy of pines and oaks cast deep shadows across the path, making it feel even later than it was. I hadn't passed another car in at least an hour. Finally, I saw it, a small wooden cabin nestled among the trees. It looked exactly like the pictures online. Rustic but well kept. A single porch light glowed faintly above the front door, casting a small pool of light onto the steps. I parked my car, grabbed my overnight bag, and climbed the steps. A welcome note sat on the porch railing, along with a bottle of red wine. "Welcome. Hope you enjoy your stay. Make yourself at home. Mark." Mark was the host, though I hadn't spoken to him directly. Everything had been arranged through the app. The note was a nice touch. I glanced at the bottle of wine, but left it where it was. I wasn't much of a drinker. The key was under the mat, just like the check-in instructions had said. I let myself in and locked the door behind me. The inside of the cabin was small but cozy. Just one main room with a bed, a kitchenette, and a fireplace. There was a single door on the left leading to a small bathroom. The place was clean, almost too clean. The countertops were spotless, the wooden floors had a polished shine, and the air smelled faintly of lemon-scented cleaner. I set my bag on the bed and walked around, taking it all in. A few books sat on a shelf by the fireplace, along with some decorative knickknacks. Everything looked normal, comfortable. Still, I couldn't shake an odd feeling. Something felt off. It wasn't anything obvious, just a nagging unease in the back of my mind. Maybe it was the remoteness of the place. The silence. No neighbors, no cell service, nothing but endless woods stretching in every direction. I shook it off. I was just being paranoid. I checked the bathroom. Small, clean, nothing unusual. The shower curtain was pulled halfway closed, but I peeked behind it just to be sure. Empty. Back in the main room, I locked the front door again, then checked the only window. It faced the woods. The glass was cold to the touch, and outside, darkness had fully settled in. I made a quick dinner, just a sandwich and some chips, then sat at the small wooden table to eat. The cabin was dead quiet except for the occasional crackle from the fireplace. After finishing, I washed my plate and turned off the lights. I wasn't tired yet, so I sat on the bed, scrolling through old photos on my phone. Then I heard it. A creak. Soft but distinct. It came from the far corner of the room, near the closet. I froze, straining to listen. The cabin was old, settling wood, wind outside, maybe a raccoon on the porch. It could be anything. I waited, holding my breath. Silence. After a minute, I exhaled and shook my head. I was letting my imagination get the best of me. I set my phone on the nightstand, crawled under the covers, and closed my eyes. Sleep came slowly. Somewhere in the middle of the night, I woke up. At first, I wasn't sure why. Then I heard it again, movement. A soft shuffling, almost like something moving inside the walls. I lay completely still, heart hammering. Mice? Squirrels? Maybe. But the noise was too deliberate, too steady. I turned my head slowly toward the closet. The door was closed, just as I'd left it. But for some reason, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was behind it. I told myself I was being stupid. This was an old cabin. Old cabins made noise. Still, I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. I aimed the beam at the closet door, half expecting it to be open. It wasn't. I swallowed hard. Relax. You're alone. There's no one here. The noise had stopped. Eventually, I drifted back to sleep. The next morning, I woke early. Sunlight streamed through the window, and the unease from the night before felt distant, almost silly. Still, before making breakfast, I walked over to the closet, just to check. I grabbed the handle and pulled it open. Inside, coats hung neatly on a wooden rod. A few extra blankets were stacked on the top shelf. Nothing strange. Then I noticed something, a small hole in the back wall, right at eye level. It was about the size of a quarter, positioned perfectly, so someone standing inside the closet could see into the room. My stomach turned. I hadn't noticed it before. I leaned in, peering through. On the other side was darkness. Just empty space behind the wall. A chill ran down my spine. Had the noise I heard last night been coming from inside the wall? I backed away, my pulse quickening. No, I was overthinking. Maybe the hole was there for ventilation, or maybe it was just from an old nail. But something didn't sit right. I needed to leave. I grabbed my bag, stuffing my things inside as fast as I could. The sooner I was out of this cabin, the better. That's when I heard it. A faint creak behind me. I turned slowly. The closet door, which I had left open, was now slightly closed. Not fully. Just enough to make my breath catch in my throat. I stared at it. I hadn't heard it move. I hadn't seen it shift. But somehow, it was not how I left it. And then, a hand, a pale, bare hand slid out from the darkness inside the closet, gripping the edge of the door. I didn't think. I ran. I bolted for the front door, fumbled with the lock, and threw it open. As I sprinted to my car, I didn't look back. I couldn't. I jumped in, locked the doors, and peeled out, gravel spraying behind me. Only when I hit the main road did I finally glance in the rearview mirror. The cabin was still there. The front door was open, and standing in the doorway, watching me leave, was a man. He was thin, his clothes ragged. His eyes locked onto mine. He had been there all along, hiding, watching. I never reported it. I never even left a review. I just never went back. And to this day, I wonder, how many other guests did he watch before me? When I booked the Airbnb, I didn't expect anything out of the ordinary. It was a last-minute work trip, and all I needed was a quiet place to sleep for a few nights. Hotels in the city were either too expensive or fully booked, so I settled for a small suburban house on the outskirts of town. The listing had decent reviews, clean, comfortable, good Wi-Fi. The pictures showed a modest single-story home with a well-kept yard and a cozy interior. Nothing fancy, but good enough. The host, someone named Brian, had a simple check-in process. Self-check-in, the message said, key under the mat. That was fine with me. I wasn't looking for conversation, just a place to rest after long workdays. I arrived in the evening, just as the sun was setting. The neighborhood was quiet, older homes, neatly trimmed lawns, and not a single person outside. The house itself looked just like the pictures. A little outdated but clean. The porch light flickered as I grabbed the key from under the mat and let myself in. Inside, the place had a strange smell, something faint, like old wood and damp fabric. Not terrible, just lived in. The lights worked fine, and the furniture was basic but comfortable. A small living room with a couch and a TV, a kitchen with a round dining table, and a short hallway leading to the bedroom and bathroom. I dropped my bag in the bedroom and did a quick walkthrough of the house. The kitchen had all the essentials. The bathroom was clean. The Wi-Fi worked. Everything seemed normal. Then I noticed the door. It was in the hallway, just past the bathroom. A plain white door, closed, with an old brass handle. At first, I thought it led to a closet, but something about it caught my attention. Unlike the other doors in the house, this one had a deadbolt on the outside. I tried the handle. Locked. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the Airbnb listing again. The description said it was a full house rental. No mention of locked areas. That was odd, but I shrugged it off. Maybe it was just a storage room, or maybe the host kept personal belongings in there. I was exhausted from the drive, so I didn't think much of it. I locked the front door, double-checked the windows, and went to bed. I woke up sometime in the middle of the night. At first, I wasn't sure why. The house was silent. No cars outside, no sounds from the street. Just dead silence. Then I heard it, a soft creaking noise. It came from the hallway. I held my breath, listening. The sound was faint, like someone shifting their weight on old floorboards. A slow, deliberate movement. I turned on my phone flashlight and pointed it toward the bedroom door. It was still shut. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe the house settling, maybe my imagination. Then, just as I was about to roll over and go back to sleep, I heard something else. A deep, steady breathing. Not mine. I sat up, heart pounding. The sound was barely audible, but it was there, slow inhales, slow exhales. Coming from somewhere past the hallway. I stared at the door, frozen. It was coming from behind the locked door. I didn't move for a long time. My mind raced through possibilities. Was someone inside? Had someone broken in? Was the house supposed to be empty? I grabbed my phone and opened the Airbnb app. I typed out a message to Brian. Hey, I just wanted to check. Does someone live in the house? I thought it was a private rental, but I'm hearing noises. I hesitated before sending it. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe it was an old heating system making noises. But that breathing, it was too human. I hit send and waited. No response. I checked the time, 3:14 a.m. There was no way I was going back to sleep. Morning finally came, and I forced myself to leave the bedroom. Sunlight streamed through the windows, making the house feel almost normal again. I checked my phone, still no reply from Brian. I walked to the hallway and stopped in front of the locked door. In the daylight, it didn't seem as threatening, just a normal door. But now, standing this close, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. The deadbolt was slightly different. It looked old, scratched up, like it had been locked and unlocked many times. I reached out and knocked. Silence. I knocked again, harder this time. Hello. No answer. I pressed my ear to the door and listened. No breathing. No movement. Maybe I really had imagined it. I sighed and decided to let it go. I had work to do, and I wasn't about to let paranoia ruin my trip. I stayed out late, trying to avoid the house as much as possible. By the time I got back, it was nearly midnight. The house was dark. I turned on the lights, locked the front door behind me, and went straight to the bedroom. I wasn't taking any chances tonight. I pushed a chair against the door before getting into bed, but sleep wouldn't come. Every sound made me jump. The hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the wall clock. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, waiting for something to happen. Then it did. A soft click. It came from the hallway. I sat up, heart pounding. The sound had been quiet, but I knew exactly what it was. The deadbolt. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. My hands were shaking as I stepped out of bed and crept toward the bedroom door. The chair was still in place. The door was still shut. But in the hallway, the locked door was now slightly open. Just an inch. I stood there, staring at the gap. A sliver of darkness beyond. My breathing was shallow, my pulse hammering in my ears. Then the door moved. Not much, just a slow, deliberate inch, opening wider. I ran. I grabbed my bag, my keys, and I ran out of the house without looking back. I got in my car, locked the doors, and started the engine. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely grip the wheel. As I pulled away, I glanced at the house one last time. In one of the windows, just barely visible in the darkness, a face, watching me leave. I drove straight to a motel and booked a room for the night. I didn't sleep. I kept checking my phone, waiting for a reply from Brian. It never came. The next morning, I called Airbnb customer service. I told them what happened, but without solid proof. All they could do was issue me a refund and remove the listing. Out of curiosity, I did some digging. I found an old real estate listing for the house from years ago. It mentioned a finished basement with a separate entrance. But that entrance had been sealed off. Whoever had been living down there, they never left. I travel a lot for work. It's mostly short stays, 3 to 5 nights in different cities, moving from one place to another. Hotels can be expensive, so I usually book Airbnbs, especially small apartments or studios. They feel more personal, and usually I don't have to deal with front desks, elevators, or noisy guests in the next room. This time, I was in a mid-sized city in the Midwest, staying for 4 nights. The Airbnb I booked was a cozy little studio near downtown. The photos showed a clean, modern space with a neatly made bed, a tiny kitchen, and a simple bathroom. It looked perfect. I arrived late in the evening. The check-in instructions were straightforward, a lockbox next to the door with a key inside. I punched in the code, took the key, and let myself in. The first thing I noticed was the silence. The apartment was eerily quiet. No hum of an air conditioner, no traffic noise, nothing. I told myself that was a good thing. After all, I wanted a peaceful place to sleep. The second thing I noticed was the mirror. It was large, mounted on the wall above the bathroom sink, spanning almost the entire width of the vanity. Something about it caught my eye right away, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Maybe it was the way the edges weren't completely flush with the wall. Or maybe it was how the glass seemed darker than normal. But I was exhausted from my flight, so I brushed it off. That first night, I slept fine. The second night, I started noticing little things. The towel I had used in the morning was folded differently when I got back that evening. I was sure I had left my suitcase half-zipped, but now it was completely closed. At first, I thought I was just being paranoid. Maybe I had done those things and simply forgotten. But then there was the mirror again. I stood in front of it, staring at my own reflection. Something about it still felt wrong. I reached out and knocked lightly on the glass. The sound was strange, hollow. That was when I remembered a trick I had seen online for checking two-way mirrors. I touched my fingertip to the glass. Normally, if a mirror is real, there should be a small gap between your fingertip and its reflection. But in a two-way mirror, your reflection touches your actual finger. I held my breath and touched the glass. No gap. My stomach dropped. I took a step back, my heart beginning to race. This wasn't just an ordinary mirror. Something was behind it. I turned off the bathroom light and shined my phone flashlight directly at the mirror. A chill ran through me. For a split second, I thought I saw a movement behind the glass. I stood there frozen, every nerve in my body screaming at me to get out. But part of me needed to know. I reached out again, pressing my palm flat against the glass. I pushed just slightly. It shifted. The mirror wasn't attached to the wall. I forced myself to breathe, backing out of the bathroom. I grabbed my phone and did a quick search. How to check if a mirror is two-way. One suggestion stood out. Shine a flashlight at an angle and see if there's a gap behind the mirror. My hands were shaking as I did it. I angled my phone light to the side, watching the edges of the glass. And there it was. A gap. A small, dark space behind the mirror. Someone could be behind there, watching. Had been watching. For how long? I grabbed my bag and bolted. I didn't even bother turning off the lights. I just ran. My heart was pounding as I fumbled with the lock and yanked the door open. I practically sprinted to my car, jumping inside and locking the doors. I sat there, trying to calm my breathing, my eyes never leaving the apartment door. Nothing happened. No one followed. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was still in there. Finally, I called Airbnb's emergency line. They told me to leave immediately and that they would contact the host. I told them I had already left. I drove to a nearby hotel and booked a room for the night. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I got a call from Airbnb. They said the host had denied any knowledge of a two-way mirror, but the listing was suddenly removed from the site. I went back later that day, with a friend. I wasn't about to go in there alone again. When we arrived, the apartment door was wide open. Inside, it looked almost exactly the same, except for one thing. The bathroom mirror was gone. All that was left was a hole in the wall, leading to a dark, empty space. Someone had been behind it, watching me, the entire time. I arrived at the Airbnb just before sunset. It was a single-story home, painted a dull shade of blue, with a small front yard that hadn't been mowed in weeks. It wasn't anything fancy, but I wasn't looking for fancy. I just needed a quiet place to stay for a few nights while I attended a work conference in the city. I parked my car in the driveway, grabbed my suitcase, and walked up to the front door. The check-in instructions had been simple. There was a keypad, and the host had sent me the code earlier in the day. I punched in the numbers, heard the lock click, and stepped inside. The house smelled faintly of lemon cleaner, and the air was still, like no one had been inside for days. The living room was sparsely furnished, a gray couch, a coffee table, and a small TV mounted on the wall. A hallway led to the bedrooms, and just beyond that, I could see the kitchen with its old wooden cabinets and white tile countertops. I set my suitcase down by the couch and took a slow walk through the house. The bedroom I'd be staying in was at the end of the hall. It had a queen-sized bed, a nightstand, and a small dresser with a mirror above it. The closet door was slightly ajar, revealing a row of empty wooden hangers. Everything seemed normal. I unpacked my essentials, took a quick shower, and settled in for the night. But something felt off. At first, I couldn't pinpoint what it was. It was just a vague unease, a quiet nagging in the back of my mind. The kind of feeling you get when you're being watched, even when you know you're alone. I brushed it off. It was a new place, and I wasn't used to it yet. I turned off the lights, got into bed, and fell asleep. I woke up early, feeling well-rested. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, casting long shadows across the room. I stretched, got out of bed, and walked into the kitchen to make some coffee. As I filled the coffee maker with water, my eyes drifted to the living room. The coffee table was missing. I frowned. I was sure it had been there last night. I even remembered setting my phone down on it before heading to bed. I took a few steps into the living room, scanning the space. The table was nowhere in sight. Maybe I was mistaken. Maybe I had just thought there was a coffee table. I shook off the weird feeling creeping up my spine, went back to the kitchen, and made my coffee. By mid-morning, I had convinced myself I had imagined it. I spent the rest of the day working remotely on my laptop, occasionally glancing at the empty space where I was sure the table had been. That night, I double-checked everything before going to bed. I took pictures of the living room with my phone, just to be sure. But when I woke up the next morning, something else had changed. My suitcase was open. I had left it zipped up the night before. I was sure of it. But now, the zipper was halfway down, and some of my clothes had shifted, as if someone had rifled through them. A cold wave of unease washed over me. I knelt beside the suitcase, checking my belongings. Nothing was missing. I stood up and scanned the room. The closet door, which had been open the first day, was now shut. I swallowed hard, trying to calm my nerves. Maybe I had closed it and just didn't remember. Maybe I had forgotten to zip my suitcase all the way. I kept telling myself those things, but my gut wasn't convinced. By the third day, I was on edge. The coffee table was still gone. My suitcase was untouched that morning, but now something else was missing, my phone charger. I had left it plugged into the outlet beside the bed, but now it was just gone. I searched the entire room. The drawers, the nightstand, under the bed. Nothing. Frustrated, I checked my photos from the night before. The charger had been there. I had even taken a picture of it, just to reassure myself. I was starting to feel like I was losing my mind. Objects don't just disappear. I decided to test something. Before going to bed that night, I placed a pen on the kitchen counter. A small, insignificant object. One I wouldn't forget. Then, I went to sleep. The next morning, the pen was gone. I sat on the couch, gripping my knees, heart pounding. Someone was coming inside the house. I checked the doors and windows. All locked. There was no sign of forced entry. That night, I set up a small test. I took a piece of thread and stretched it across the front door at ankle height, taping the ends to the door frame. If someone came inside during the night, the thread would break. I also placed a small pile of salt just inside the door, a subtle way to see if anyone stepped through. Then I locked the door, went to bed, and barely slept. At 3 a.m., I woke up to a sound. A soft, slow creaking. I held my breath. It was coming from the living room. I reached for my phone, but my hands were shaking. I turned on the flashlight and crept toward the door. The thread was broken, and the salt had been disturbed. Someone had been inside. I didn't even bother packing. I grabbed my car keys, threw on my shoes, and left. As I pulled out of the driveway, I saw something that made my stomach drop. The front window blinds had been moved. Someone was inside, watching me leave. I drove to the nearest gas station and sat in my car, hands shaking. I called the Airbnb host, trying to keep my voice steady. "Has anyone else been staying in the house?" I asked. "No," he said. "Just you." I told him everything. The missing objects, the open suitcase, the broken thread. There was a long pause. Then his voice dropped. "You should leave." I already had. Later, I checked the Airbnb listing again. It had been removed. I arrived at the Airbnb just before sunset. It was a large, old Victorian house divided into separate rental units. The listing was cheap, and I needed a quiet place to stay for a few days while I was in town for work. The neighborhood was quiet, almost too quiet. The kind of place where you expected to see kids riding bikes or neighbors chatting on their porches, but there was no one. Just empty sidewalks and houses with curtains drawn tight. The host had left a key under the doormat, just as they had promised. When I pushed the door open, the smell of old wood and faint cleaning chemicals greeted me. The apartment itself was decent. High ceilings, heavy wooden doors, and a fireplace that looked like it hadn't been used in decades. The furniture was a mix of modern and antique, the kind of thing that made you wonder if someone still lived there full-time. I set my bags down and did a quick walkthrough. The apartment had everything I needed: a small kitchen, a living room, a bathroom, and a single bedroom at the back. There was a locked door near the entrance, which I assumed led to another unit. The place felt a little eerie. Not in a supernatural way, just off. The walls were thick, and the floors creaked slightly with every step. It was the kind of house that seemed to absorb sound. Even with my suitcase rolling across the floor, it still felt too quiet. I shrugged it off. Old houses had their quirks. I spent the evening settling in. I made a quick dinner, answered some emails, and read a book until I felt tired enough to sleep. Around 10 p.m., I turned off the lights and climbed into bed. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up. At first, I wasn't sure why. Then I heard it. Soft footsteps. Not the heavy creaking of someone walking normally, but the light tap, tap, tap of small feet moving across the hallway. I lay in bed listening. The sound was faint, but distinct. It stopped right outside my bedroom door. I held my breath. Silence. I stared at the door for a long time, waiting for something else to happen. But there was nothing. Eventually, I convinced myself I had imagined it. Maybe it was an old pipe or the house settling. I rolled over and forced myself to go back to sleep. The next morning, I texted the host. "Hey, just wanted to check. There's another unit in the house, right? I thought I heard someone moving around last night." The reply came quickly. "There's another apartment upstairs, but no one is staying there right now. You should have the whole place to yourself." I stared at my phone. So if no one else was in the house, who had been walking in the hallway? I tried to put it out of my mind. Maybe I had been half asleep and imagined the whole thing. I had a long day of work ahead, so I focused on getting ready. I spent most of the day out. By the time I got back, the sun was already low in the sky. The house felt different at night, darker, quieter. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone else had been there while I was gone. My toothbrush wasn't where I had left it. My suitcase was slightly open. I checked the doors. Still locked. Nothing looked stolen. Maybe I was just being paranoid. I left a small lamp on when I went to bed that night. Just enough light to see the room if I woke up again. And I did wake up. It was around 2 a.m. The air felt heavier, like the house was holding its breath. Then I heard it. A soft, rhythmic knocking on my bedroom door. Knock, knock, knock. I froze. It wasn't loud. It wasn't aggressive. Just slow, patient knocks, as if someone was waiting for me to answer. I reached for my phone with a shaking hand and turned on the flashlight. I didn't want to open the door. I didn't even want to move. The knocking stopped. Silence. I listened for footsteps, breathing, anything. But there was nothing. I stayed awake for hours, my ears straining for the smallest sound. Eventually, exhaustion won, and I drifted off into a restless sleep. By morning, I had made a decision. I was going to check every inch of this apartment. I started in the living room. I checked under the couch, behind furniture, inside cabinets. Nothing. The kitchen, same thing. The bathroom, empty. Then I reached the locked door near the entrance. I pressed my ear against it. At first, nothing. Then, faintly breathing. I jerked back. Someone was in there. I grabbed my phone and called the host. It rang twice before they picked up. "Hello." "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Is there any reason a door in the apartment would be locked?" "The one near the entrance." Silence. Then, finally, "There shouldn't be a locked door in your unit." I swallowed hard. "It's locked. And I hesitated. I think someone is in there." The host's voice changed. "Are you inside the apartment right now?" "Yes." "Leave. Now." I didn't ask questions. I grabbed my bag, threw on my shoes, and practically ran out the door. I got into my car and locked the doors. A few minutes later, the host arrived. He was a middle-aged guy, dressed casually, but his face was pale. He didn't look surprised. He pulled out a set of keys and unlocked the door. I stood outside, watching as he pushed it open. The room was empty. Just an old storage space filled with dusty furniture. No signs of anyone. I exhaled, feeling stupid. Maybe I really had imagined it. Then the host turned to me and said quietly, "You need to leave. I'll refund you." That's when I saw it. The dust on the floor had been disturbed. Small footprints, leading from the door to a corner of the room. And in the corner, behind an old dresser, was a small pile of blankets and an empty water bottle. Someone had been in there. I took the refund and left that day. I didn't ask questions. I didn't want to know. But later, I searched for news about the house. Turns out, years ago, a woman had rented the upstairs unit with her young son. She was evicted, but some neighbors swore they still saw the child around the property, even after they were gone. The host never mentioned them in the listing. Maybe he didn't want to scare off guests. Maybe he thought the kid had finally left. But I don't think he ever did. And I don't think he was knocking because he wanted to scare me. I think he was knocking because he wanted someone to find him. I arrived at the house late in the afternoon, just as the sun was starting to dip behind the trees. It was a small, single-story rental in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of town. Nothing fancy, just a simple place to spend a few nights while I was in the area for work. The listing had described it as a full house rental, which was exactly what I wanted. I liked my privacy. Hotels felt too sterile, and I wasn't interested in shared spaces. I wanted to be alone. The host, a man named Eric, had left detailed instructions for self-check-in. The key was in a lockbox beside the front door. I punched in the code, retrieved the key, and stepped inside. The place was clean, modestly furnished. A small living room with a couch and a TV. A kitchen with a round table and 2 chairs. A short hallway led to a bedroom and a bathroom. Everything looked exactly like the photos, except for one thing. At the end of the hallway, there was a door that wasn't in any of the listing pictures. A plain white door with a brass doorknob. When I tried it, it didn't budge. Locked. I checked the listing again. It had clearly said entire home. But now that I thought about it, there had been no mention of a second room. No photos of that part of the house. I messaged the host. "Hey, I just got in. Quick question. There's a locked door at the end of the hall. Is that just a storage room?" A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. "Hey, yes, that's just a storage space. Nothing to worry about. Hope you enjoy your stay." That was that. I shrugged it off. It wasn't unusual for people to keep a locked room in a rental, storing personal belongings or cleaning supplies. I went about my evening, unpacking, fixing myself a sandwich, flipping through channels on the TV. By the time I got into bed, I had completely forgotten about the locked door. The first night, I slept fine. But the second night, something woke me up. It was a noise. Soft, rhythmic. A tapping sound. I lay still in the dark, holding my breath, listening. Tap, tap, tap. I turned my head toward the hallway. The sound was coming from there. I sat up slowly, my heart thudding. The tapping stopped. I stayed frozen for a long moment, waiting, ears straining. When nothing else happened, I forced myself to relax. It was probably the house settling, or maybe the wind rattling something outside. I checked my phone. 3:12 a.m. I rolled over and tried to sleep. The next day, I went about my work, pushing the strange noise to the back of my mind. By the time I got back to the house that evening, I had convinced myself it had been nothing. That night, I went to bed early. Sometime after midnight, I woke up again. This time, it wasn't tapping. It was a soft scratching sound. I turned my head toward the hallway. It was coming from the locked door. I sat up, my pulse kicking up a notch. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Long, slow, deliberate. I swallowed hard. Just an animal, I told myself. Maybe something had gotten into the walls. A raccoon, a squirrel, something. But it didn't sound like an animal. It sounded intentional. I forced myself to get up. I grabbed my phone and walked slowly down the hall. The scratching stopped. I reached the door and stood there, my hand hovering near the doorknob. I knocked lightly. "Hello." Silence. I knocked again, harder this time. "Eric." Nothing. I exhaled, feeling foolish. I was letting my imagination get the best of me. Just as I turned to walk away, a thump sounded from the other side of the door. I jumped back. My breath caught in my throat. I stared at the door, my skin crawling. Something was in there. I messaged Eric immediately. "Hey, I know you said that's just a storage room, but I swear I heard something inside." Scratching, then a loud thump. "Are you sure there's nothing in there?" He didn't respond. I paced the living room, my nerves on edge. I considered calling someone, the police maybe, but what would I even say? That I heard a noise in a locked room? That I thought something was inside? Eventually, exhaustion won out. I forced myself to go back to bed, though it took me a long time to fall asleep. The next morning, I checked my phone. Still no response from Eric. I went to work, trying to shake the uneasy feeling that had settled over me. But when I got back that evening, something was different. The locked door. The doorknob was scratched. Deep, jagged marks ran down the wood below it, like something had been clawing at it from the inside. I backed away slowly, my hands shaking. And then my phone buzzed. A message from Eric. "Do not try to open that door." That was it. No explanation. No reassurance. Just a warning. I felt a cold sweat break out on my skin. I tried calling him. No answer. I sent another message. "Eric, what is in that room?" No response. I didn't know what to do. My gut told me to leave, but I had already paid for the place, and logically, there was no real danger, right? That night, I locked my bedroom door. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, waiting. At some point, I must have drifted off, because I woke up to a sound that made my stomach drop. The doorknob turning. Not the locked room's door. My door. I bolted upright. Someone was trying to open my bedroom door. I scrambled for my phone and turned on the flashlight. "Who's there?" My voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. The movement stopped. I held my breath. Minutes passed. Long, suffocating silence. Then, slowly, I heard footsteps retreating down the hall. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. At dawn, I threw my things into my bag, grabbed my keys, and got the hell out. I didn't even bother messaging Eric again. I just left. Hours later, as I sat in a coffee shop trying to calm myself down, I got one final message from him. "I told you not to open the door." I blocked his number. I never looked back. The rental was perfect, or at least it should have been. A small, quiet lake house tucked away in the trees, secluded enough for peace, but not so far removed that it felt unsafe. When I found it online, the photos made it look like something out of a magazine. Large windows overlooking a still lake, a wooden dock stretching into the water, a cozy interior with soft lighting and a fireplace. It seemed ideal for a weekend getaway. I had been feeling overwhelmed with work, and I needed a break. No phone calls, no emails, just a few days alone, where I could wake up to the sound of birds and fall asleep to the gentle lapping of water against the shore. The host had excellent reviews. People mentioned how clean the house was, how well-stocked the kitchen had been, and how the view of the lake was even better in person. The check-in process was simple: key in a lockbox, clear instructions, and no need to interact with anyone. That was exactly what I wanted. I arrived in the late afternoon. The drive had been long, and by the time I pulled onto the gravel driveway, the sun was low in the sky, casting a golden glow over the trees. The house looked just as it had in the photos, maybe even better. I grabbed my bag and stepped onto the porch. The air smelled fresh, clean, like damp wood and pine. I punched in the code, heard the soft click of the lock, and pushed open the door. The first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the eerie, uncomfortable kind, just a deep, peaceful quiet, the kind you only get when you're far from cities and highways. Inside, the house was simple but well kept. Hardwood floors, a small kitchen to my left, a cozy living area to my right. A sliding glass door led out to a deck overlooking the lake, and beyond that, the dock stretched into the water. I walked through the house, checking each room out of habit. Everything was as expected. A single bedroom with a neatly made bed, a small but modern bathroom, and a few decorative touches that made it feel more like a home than a rental. I unpacked quickly, setting my bag in the bedroom before heading to the kitchen. The host had left a welcome note on the counter, along with a bottle of wine. I smiled at the gesture. After a quick meal, I decided to sit outside for a bit. The sun had almost set, and the lake reflected the soft pink and orange hues of the sky. I pulled a chair to the edge of the deck, took a deep breath, and just listened. The quiet was soothing. Every so often, I heard a bird in the trees or the faint rustle of leaves in the wind. The water was still. There was no one around. At least, that's what I thought. I don't know when I first noticed him. I had been sitting there for maybe 15 minutes, staring at the water, when something in my peripheral vision caught my attention. A figure, standing at the tree line, just beyond the glow of the porch light. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, just the way the shadows fell. But as my eyes adjusted, the shape became clearer. A man. He was standing perfectly still, just far enough into the trees that I couldn't make out his features. My stomach tightened. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe a hiker, maybe someone from another cabin nearby. But I knew that wasn't true. The listing had made it clear. There were no other houses nearby. I glanced back at the house, debating whether I should go inside. When I looked back at the trees, the figure was gone. That night, I locked all the doors and pulled the curtains shut. I told myself I was overreacting, but my mind wouldn't let it go. I kept thinking about that figure, standing so still, just watching. I barely slept. Every little noise made me jump. The creak of the wooden deck, the wind against the windows. I found myself straining to hear anything out of place. By morning, I convinced myself it had just been paranoia. Maybe it really had been a trick of the light, or maybe some random camper passing through. Either way, I wasn't going to let it ruin my trip. I spent the day hiking nearby trails, taking in the fresh air, trying to enjoy the peace I had come for. When I returned to the cabin, I felt better, less on edge. That lasted until I stepped onto the deck and saw the footprints. They were fresh, bare footprints, slightly smudged in the damp earth beneath the window, leading away from the house. My stomach dropped. Someone had been standing there, right outside the window. The prints led back toward the tree line, disappearing into the undergrowth. I scanned the woods, looking for any sign of movement, but I saw nothing. I felt my heartbeat in my throat. I had locked the doors. I had checked the windows. How long had someone been watching me? I didn't know what to do. I wasn't sure if calling the police would accomplish anything. They wouldn't send someone out here over footprints in the dirt. And what would I even say? That I saw a figure last night, and now there were footprints outside my window? I went inside and locked everything again. This time, I checked every inch of the house, making sure no windows had been tampered with. I kept the curtains drawn all evening. Every so often, I would peek out, scanning the trees. I didn't see anything, but that didn't make me feel any better. I slept with the bedroom door locked and my phone in my hand. I woke up sometime in the middle of the night. I wasn't sure what had woken me at first, just a deep, instinctual sense that something was wrong. Then I heard it. A soft creak, the sound of weight shifting on wooden planks. The deck. I held my breath. Another creak, closer this time. I was frozen. My brain screamed at me to do something, to move, to grab something, to hide. But I couldn't. Then silence. I sat there for what felt like hours, barely breathing, straining to hear any movement. Eventually, I forced myself to move. Slowly, carefully, I slid out of bed and crept toward the window. My hands trembled as I pulled the curtain back a fraction of an inch. There, standing at the edge of the deck, was the man. He was closer now, closer than before. He wasn't moving, just watching. I stepped back from the window, my heart pounding. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, barely able to keep my hands steady. The operator answered, and I whispered my address, trying to explain that someone was outside my cabin. They said they'd send a unit, but I knew it would take time. I didn't know what to do. I wasn't sure if I should stay put or try to leave. I grabbed the small kitchen knife I had seen earlier, my mind racing. Minutes passed, then an hour. I kept checking the window, but eventually the figure was gone. The police arrived after what felt like forever. They checked the property, but of course they found nothing. Just footprints, leading to the deck, leading back into the trees. They asked if I wanted to file a report. I did, but I knew it wouldn't lead to anything. I packed my bags and left before the sun even came up. I never got an explanation. The host apologized when I told them what happened, but said they had never heard of anything like that before. I still don't know who he was, or how many nights he stood outside watching. I had never been the type to spend a lot on accommodations. When I traveled, I prioritized budget over luxury. If a place was cheap, clean, and in a decent location, that was all I needed. This trip was no different. I was visiting a new city for a week, a mix of work and leisure. Instead of booking an expensive hotel, I found an Airbnb that seemed perfect. It was a modern studio apartment, well furnished, with high ratings and a great location near the city center. Best of all, it was significantly cheaper than any hotel in the area. The listing photos showed a stylish, minimalist space with a sleek white bed, a glass-walled shower, and a small but well-equipped kitchen. It looked like the kind of place where professionals stayed, business travelers who needed a quiet, convenient spot to crash. I read through the reviews carefully. Most people praised the cleanliness and comfort. A few mentioned that the host, Daniel, was responsive but not overly involved. That was fine with me. I didn't need much from a host, just a key and some basic instructions. I booked it for 6 nights. The check-in process was smooth. Daniel messaged me the day before with instructions. Key is in the lockbox by the door. Code is 4729. Let yourself in. Make yourself at home. When I arrived, the building looked exactly like the pictures. A modern high-rise with a secured entrance and a quiet, well-maintained lobby. I found the apartment easily, punched in the code, grabbed the key, and stepped inside. Everything was just as I expected, clean, sleek, and modern. The air smelled faintly of lavender, probably from an air freshener. I dropped my bags by the door and took a quick look around. The main room was small but stylish. A queen-sized bed with crisp white sheets sat against the far wall. A desk with a lamp and a small chair was positioned near the window, which had a great view of the city skyline. The kitchenette had a microwave, a fridge, and a tiny stovetop. The bathroom was separated by a frosted glass wall. I checked inside, spotless. Fresh towels neatly folded on a shelf. Everything seemed perfect. I set my suitcase on the luggage rack and sat on the bed. The mattress was firm but comfortable. I pulled out my phone and messaged Daniel. Checked in. Place looks great. Thanks. A minute later, he responded. Glad you like it. Let me know if you need anything. I didn't. Not yet. After unpacking, I grabbed dinner at a small restaurant nearby, then walked around the neighborhood. It was a lively area, cafes, bars, boutique shops, a mix of tourists and locals. By the time I got back, it was nearly midnight. I locked the door, changed into pajamas, and climbed into bed. The apartment was silent. The only noise was the faint hum of the city outside. I reached for the light switch, but hesitated. Something felt strange. Not wrong, exactly. Just off. I shook it off. It was just the unfamiliarity of a new place. I turned off the light and rolled onto my side, facing the wall. I fell asleep quickly. The next morning, I woke up feeling well-rested. I stretched, yawned, and grabbed my phone. That's when I noticed it. The smoke detector on the ceiling, directly above the bed, had a tiny red light. I frowned. Smoke detectors usually had lights, but this one was different. The glow was faint but steady. I sat up and stared at it. Something about the way it blinked made me uneasy. I tried to dismiss it. Maybe all smoke detectors in this building had a blinking light. Maybe I was overthinking it. Still, the thought stuck with me. After a shower and breakfast, I left for a full day of exploring. I walked through the historic district, checked out a museum, and had lunch at a rooftop cafe. By evening, I had almost forgotten about the smoke detector. Almost. That night, as I got ready for bed, the feeling returned. That same unease. I lay in bed, staring at the red light. The more I looked, the more I felt like something was wrong. I sat up and grabbed my phone. I searched. Hidden cameras in Airbnb rentals. Thousands of results popped up. Articles, horror stories, videos. Common places to hide cameras. Smoke detectors. Alarm clocks. Air vents. Mirrors. My stomach tightened. I got up and pulled the chair from the desk. Standing on it, I reached for the smoke detector. My fingers traced over the plastic casing. It felt normal, but then something odd. It wasn't fully secured to the ceiling. It wobbled slightly when I pressed on it. My pulse quickened. I twisted it gently. It came off easily. Inside, where there should have been a normal sensor, was a tiny black lens. A camera. I nearly dropped the detector. My hands were shaking. I climbed off the chair and stared at it in disbelief. Someone had been watching me. I felt sick. I grabbed my phone and started recording, zooming in on the hidden camera. I took pictures, my mind racing. I had been here for over 24 hours. I had showered here. I had slept here. I had changed clothes here. Who else had stayed in this apartment? How long had this been happening? I forced myself to calm down. I needed to leave. Now. I threw my clothes into my suitcase and zipped it shut. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my phone and messaged Daniel. There is a hidden camera in the smoke detector. I'm leaving. Expect the police. No response. I didn't care. I grabbed my bags and practically ran out of the apartment. As I reached the lobby, my phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. You're mistaken. That's just a motion sensor. I ignored it. I booked a hotel nearby and took a taxi straight there. Once in my new room, I locked the door, pulled the curtains, and sat on the bed, my heart still pounding. I sent the photos and video to the police. Then, I reported the listing to Airbnb. Within minutes, Daniel's profile disappeared. The next morning, the police called me back. An officer confirmed that they had checked the apartment. The camera was real. They were investigating Daniel. I never found out what happened to him. Whether he was arrested, whether other guests had found the same thing, whether their recordings had been leaked somewhere online. But I never used Airbnb again. And now, whenever I stay in a hotel, the first thing I do? I check every smoke detector. I should have double-checked the address. That thought repeated over and over in my head as I sat in my car, hands shaking, heart still pounding in my chest. I had just made the worst mistake of my life, one that could have ended far worse than it did. Let me start from the beginning. I had booked the Airbnb a few weeks in advance. It was just a small house on the edge of town, nothing fancy, but the pictures made it look clean and cozy. I needed a quiet place for a work trip, and it was cheaper than a hotel. The host, Mark, had messaged me the day before with check-in instructions. Address, 427 Oak Ridge Drive. Key location, under the doormat. Check-in time, after 8 p.m. Simple enough. The drive took longer than expected. I had planned to arrive around 7, maybe grab some dinner before heading to the house, but traffic slowed me down. By the time I pulled into the neighborhood, it was nearly midnight. The street was dark, with only a few porch lights on. The houses were spaced apart, each with large yards and tall trees. It was quiet. I found the house, 427 Oak Ridge Drive, just like the instructions said. A small, single-story home with a white porch and a dim light glowing from the front window. It matched the photos in the listing. I parked in the driveway, got out, and grabbed my bag. The key was exactly where Mark said it would be, under the mat. I let myself inside, locking the door behind me. The place was nice. Small but clean. A living room with a couch and a coffee table, a kitchen off to the side, and a short hallway leading to what I assumed were the bedrooms. I set my bag down and checked my phone. No signal. That was annoying, but not the end of the world. I figured I'd check Wi-Fi details in the Airbnb app later. Right now, all I wanted was sleep. I found the bedroom, set my bag by the dresser, and crawled into bed without bothering to change. The mattress was surprisingly comfortable. Within minutes, I was out. I don't know what time it was when I woke up, but it was still dark. For a moment, I wasn't sure why I had woken up at all, until I heard the voices, muffled, coming from the hallway. I froze. At first, I thought maybe it was a TV. Maybe the house next door had thin walls. But as my brain woke up, I realized these voices weren't coming from another house. They were inside this one. My first instinct was that Mark, the Airbnb host, had come in without warning. But why? And who was he talking to? I slowly sat up, my heart pounding. Then I heard it. A man's voice, deep and irritated. Who the hell is in my house? I went cold. Footsteps. Coming down the hallway. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. A man and a woman stood in the doorway, staring at me. The man was middle-aged, wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt, his face twisted in confusion and anger. The woman, standing slightly behind him, clutched the collar of her robe, her eyes wide. "Who are you?" the man demanded. I couldn't speak. My throat had locked up. This wasn't Mark. This wasn't my Airbnb host. I was in the wrong house. Somehow, I had broken into their home and climbed into their bed. The key under the mat. The unlocked door. It had all been too easy. I'm sorry, I stammered, swinging my legs out of bed, hands raised. I thought this was an Airbnb. The man's face darkened. You thought what? I realized how insane it sounded. I had no proof, no phone signal, no way to pull up the listing or show them the address. It was a mistake, I said quickly, standing up, my hands still raised. I swear, I booked an Airbnb. The host told me the key was under the mat. I must have gotten the address wrong. The woman still hadn't spoken. She was clutching her robe tighter, her gaze flicking between me and her husband. The man's expression was unreadable, but I could tell he was trying to process whether or not I was lying. You just walked in, he asked slowly. I swear the key was there. I didn't break in. He turned to his wife. Did you leave the key under the mat? She shook her head quickly. No. My stomach sank. If they hadn't left a key outside, whose key had I just used? I needed to leave before things got worse. I'll go, I said, stepping around them, moving toward the door. I'm sorry. I swear I didn't mean. The man followed. How did you even get in? The door was locked. No, it wasn't, I said, hand on the doorknob now. The key was right under the... I stopped. I had locked the door behind me when I arrived, which meant someone had unlocked it while I was inside. A chill ran through me. Can I just go? I asked quickly, turning the knob. The door was still unlocked. I yanked it open, stepping outside. The man let me. Don't let me see you here again, he said, voice tense. I nodded, practically running to my car. I threw my bag into the passenger seat and fumbled with my keys, heart racing. As I started the engine, I glanced back at the house. The couple was still standing in the doorway, watching me. But something felt wrong. The woman's expression had changed. She looked afraid, but not of me, of something inside the house. I didn't stick around to figure out what. I pulled out of the driveway and sped down the street, breathing hard. I drove a few blocks away before pulling over to check my phone. The signal was still bad, but after a few minutes, I got enough service to open my messages. And that's when I saw it. Mark's address was 472 Oak Ridge Drive, not 427. I had mixed up the numbers. I punched the correct address into my GPS. It was a mile down the road. When I arrived, the real Airbnb looked nearly identical to the house I had just left. Same porch, same layout. But the key was under the mat, exactly where Mark had said it would be. I let myself in, locking the door behind me, then sat on the couch, trying to calm down. That couple's door had been locked. The key under the mat wasn't theirs. So who left it there? And who unlocked the door while I was sleeping? I didn't sleep at all that night. I was always the type of person who liked to travel on a budget. Hotels were nice, but they added up quickly, and I preferred something that felt a little more like home. That's why Airbnb was my go-to choice. I had stayed in dozens of them over the years, city apartments, countryside cottages, beachside bungalows. Some were fancy, others were just a place to crash, but all of them had been safe. Until this one. It was just a simple rental, a small, single-bedroom unit in a larger house. Nothing too fancy, but clean, affordable, and in a decent location. I was only staying for 3 nights while I wrapped up some business in the city. The listing had good reviews, the check-in process was smooth, and everything seemed fine. But things started feeling wrong almost immediately. The moment I walked inside, something was off. I couldn't put my finger on it, but the air felt used, like someone had just been there. The listing said it was a private rental, but the place felt lived in. Not in the way a well-stocked Airbnb should, but in the way a room does when someone's been occupying it. I set my bags down and took a look around. The unit was small, just a bedroom, a tiny kitchenette, and a bathroom. It was connected to the rest of the house, but the main door to the larger home was locked. The host, according to the listing, lived in another city and only rented out this portion of the house. Everything looked clean, but some things felt off. The bed was made, but the pillows looked slightly uneven. The soap in the bathroom was wet. The hand towel by the sink was damp. I brushed it off, assuming the cleaning service had been there recently. Maybe they had just finished up before I arrived. I ordered some takeout, watched a few videos on my phone, and went to bed early. I slept fine at first, but at some point in the night, I woke up. It was the kind of wake-up where you don't know why you're awake. The room was silent, but my heart was beating just a little too fast, like my body had sensed something before my brain did. I lay there listening. Nothing. Just the distant hum of the refrigerator in the kitchenette. The faint tick of a clock. I rolled over and checked my phone, 3:17 a.m. I was about to go back to sleep when I heard it. A soft, slow creak. Not from the floor, not from the wind outside. From inside the unit. I held my breath. I listened, but there was nothing else. Just that single creak, as if weight had shifted somewhere in the apartment. Eventually, I convinced myself I was imagining things. Maybe the building was settling. Maybe it was nothing. I forced myself to close my eyes and go back to sleep. The next morning, I woke up feeling groggy. The strange feeling from the night before was still there, a little nagging unease at the back of my mind. I got up, stretched, and went to the bathroom. And that's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The bathroom door had a lock on the inside, the simple turn-and-click type. When I had gone to bed, I had left the door open. But now it was closed, and the lock was unlatched from the inside. That meant one of two things. Either I had gotten up in the middle of the night, locked the door without remembering it, then unlocked it before going back to bed, or someone had been in there. I stood frozen, staring at the door. My mind raced through possibilities. Maybe I had done it without remembering. Maybe there was some logical explanation, but my gut told me otherwise. I slowly reached out and pulled the door open. The bathroom was empty, but the hand towel, the one that had been damp last night, was hanging in a different position than before. I had a sinking feeling in my stomach. I walked out into the main area, trying to shake the unease. My suitcase, which I had left neatly zipped up, was slightly open. I stared at it. I knew for a fact I had closed it before going to bed. The more I looked around, the more I noticed little things that were off. The chair at the small dining table was slightly pulled out. My phone charger had been unplugged. My water bottle, which had been on the nightstand, was now on the floor. I told myself I was being paranoid, Maybe I had moved things without realizing it. Maybe my brain was playing tricks on me. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. That night, I locked the bedroom door before going to bed. I woke up around 2 a.m. At first, I didn't know why. But then I heard it. A soft, slow rustling sound, like fabric shifting. I held my breath, my heart pounding. It was coming from inside the unit. I reached for my phone and turned on the flashlight. I scanned the room, nothing. The chair was still slightly pulled out. My bags were still there. Then my light landed on the closet door. It was open, just slightly. I hadn't opened it since I arrived. The air in the room felt heavy. I slowly sat up, my skin crawling. And then a breath. Not mine. From the closet. My stomach clenched. I was not alone. I didn't move. I didn't blink. My mind was racing, trying to figure out what to do. And then the door moved. Just the slightest shift, like someone was trying not to be noticed. I jumped out of bed, grabbed my phone, and bolted for the door. My hands fumbled with the lock. I yanked the door open and ran out into the hallway, slamming it behind me. I didn't stop running until I was outside, standing in the freezing night air, shaking. I called the police. When the police arrived, they searched the unit. Inside the closet, they found a man. He was crouched down, trying to stay hidden. He wasn't the host. He wasn't another guest. He was a stranger. He had been living inside the Airbnb, sneaking into the unit whenever a guest arrived, hiding in the closet, and coming out at night when they were asleep. They found a small stash of food hidden in the walls. A sleeping bag was stuffed behind a panel in the back of the closet. He had been watching me the entire time. The most terrifying part? When the police asked the host about it, he admitted he knew. He had suspected someone was living in the house, but didn't want to deal with it. Instead of investigating, he kept renting out the unit anyway. I left that night and never looked back. To this day, I check every closet before I go to sleep.